Chris, I think I'm going to start. I don't want to hold it. We have a lot of staff members on the call tonight at the meeting, so I think it makes sense to start. We're being recorded. We're on two different, we're on Zoom, obviously live, and Facebook. So good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order the Cohasset Select Board meeting. It is Tuesday, November 17th at 7 p.m. Tonight's meeting will be conducted on the Zoom platform and eventually live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and Cohasset's Facebook page. The public is also invited to participate on the Zoom platform, which can be accessed using the link provided at the top of the posted agenda for tonight's meeting. Members of the board and other scheduled participants will be able to participate when called on by the chair. Board members will be asked questions. Board members will be able to ask questions of any participant. All votes taken will be done by roll call. Members of the public who wish to ask questions or participate in the meeting are asked to utilize the question and answer feature on Zoom. Please include your full name and address for the public record. The chair and vice chair will review questions and, if appropriate, direct them to a participant for a response. Please note that comments on platforms other than Zoom will not be monitored. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. So I will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call vote.
Jack Creighton here.
Corey Evans here.
Diane Kennedy present.
Paul Schubert here.
Harry Thompson here.
Great. And I'd like to invite everyone to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First item on our agenda, as usual, is public comment for items that are not being covered on our agenda tonight. If somebody has a question, you can type it into the question and answer feature on Zoom with your full name and address. And if it's a matter that's on the agenda, we may ask you to wait. If it's a matter that's not, we have very limited ability to respond. So
We
Carrie,
have a comment from Chris Allen.
okay.
I can read it if you want me to.
Yep, please.
So Chris Allen, 21 Pleasant Street. He says the superintendent's statement over the weekend stated that he consulted with town and safety officials regarding the closing of the schools. Can the board please articulate the chain of events and how everyone weighed in?
Great, thanks. So I will leave that for our community update, which I know we're going to be discussing as we usually do, sort of where we're at in our emergency management situation in this pandemic. And I'll ask our officials to respond to that through their comments. Okay, any other public comment? Carrie, we're good?
Don't see any.
Great, thank you. So actually, perfect segue. We're going to go right into the community update. And I don't know who wants to start us off, Pam or Chief Quigley.
Sure.
Good
Pam,
evening.
You want
I was going to say,
start?
Chief Quigley, let you go.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess first I can take any questions that anybody has, but I guess I can start with, what's it, Mr. Allen from Pleasant Street?
Yeah, so basically the question was just to sort of review the chain of events that resulted in the cancellation of the schools or the suspension of in-person learning.
Yes, that's completely that's a school decision. That's on the school district. We did have a Zoom meeting, on, I think it was Saturday, Chris. Yeah, Saturday morning, and Chris, myself, and the emergency management team met via Zoom on Saturday morning about the events of the night before, and later school officials joined us and wanted to know if they understood the events of the previous night fully, which they did, and they told us what they were going to do to protect the students and staff. Did I miss anything here?
No, I mean, we meet twice a week anyway, but we also meet as needed, and it became an as needed after, I don't know, what was I getting text message from you at 3:30 in the morning, Bill, on Saturday? So we all agreed to circle back Saturday morning, and we did. And we talked amongst ourselves about what we were, and then the school folks joined us, Pat and his management and his leadership team, and they had really thought through this and come up with a decision, and we supported them. I mean, decision that that they felt was the most appropriate one. I think to a large extent, they simply couldn't identify all the people who were potentially in contact. That's what it came down to, right? I mean, they have to err on the side of keeping the schools open and keeping kids safe.
It actually, one of the things we did learn as well was that they preemptively canceled the soccer game that morning. We didn't even know that was going to occur, but they were so concerned about the events of the night before that they pulled the plug on a soccer game.
If I may, just for the record and for people that might be viewing this meeting at a later time, if we could just give a little context, I think most of us, and certainly probably anybody tuned in, understands what we're talking about, which is that there was a party in town on Friday night that was broken up by the police department, and subsequently, because of the nature of what was taking place, the schools decided to go to in-person at-home learning, virtual learning for 2 weeks. Is that right? Because I wanted to summarize it and contextualize it without going down too many rabbit holes.
Yeah,
And to be clear, that was just for the middle and high school. The elementary schools,
Thank you.
person, right? The elementary schools are still in person on the regular cohort rotation.
Yeah.
The middle and high school. And again, as the superintendent, I think stated, we can't really, I think the superintendent's statement speaks for itself. And to be clear, we do talk collaboratively. At the end of the day, these are decisions that are made. And as I said, we all supported their decision. That said, it was again, it was their decision, and we did collaborate. We support. We just said we'd support whatever they decided would be the most appropriate thing to do.
and folks, we have to keep in mind that in the last month we've had 2 people die from COVID. 2 elderly folks, 2 residents dead. There's no Thanksgiving, no Christmas. They're dead. And, this is serious stuff. And I think we're at, Glenn keeps track. I think we're at day 251 for us now, 251. And, from day one, we've been trying to educate, but, circumstances dictated that we had to take a different tactic. The other day, again, we have 2 people dead, from this disease, and it's serious stuff. Unfortunately, it's the last thing we want to do, is get involved in, issuing citations and things like that. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions. Is there any other update just in terms of where we're at or what we need to be made aware of other than the incident on Friday night?
Yeah, I think Pam wanted to give us a couple of updates of things we're working on.
Okay. So if you don't mind, Pam, I do want to say, only because I think all of us have been reached out to by many, many people in town with questions ranging from, you guys, or comments, you guys, the town's being too harsh, public policy's too harsh, you're not doing enough. And I just want to say that everybody in this community, especially those volunteering on boards and committees and the people that are working on emergency management issues within the town, are doing the best they can under incredibly challenging circumstances. And whether a decision's right or wrong, we got to keep moving on. This is a really unusual and very stressful time for everybody, including all of us here. And our emergency management team, who are up 24/7, sometimes worrying about what's going to go. So, I would love to just express to the community as a member of the select board that, our purview is to manage the town and establish policies. And, we're all doing the best we can. The school committee's doing the best they can. And, I think people need to take some deep breaths a little bit and stop trying to point fingers. It's just a really unfortunate situation. We've heard from residents that, want us to issue statements naming everybody that might have come into, trouble, over the last couple of months. It's just not the business of the town. And I really ask everybody to be mindful and be neighborly, because it's an incredibly stressful time. So having said that, I will move on to Pam, without going too much further down any of these specifics of the other night.
Hi, Diane.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
Jack.
if we're, irrespective of the supporting our various public officials who are dealing with a very difficult situation, I think the town should know with clarity that this decision was made essentially by the school committee and the school superintendent. I believe that there were some other officials from police and town manager's office, but at least this selectman was never notified in advance of what was going to, of the issue or weighed in on it at all. And I think that's true of the other select people. That does not mean that we're second guessing the officials, but for the sake of clarity, everybody should understand what the decision-making situation was. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that, Jack. You're absolutely right. Pam.
Okay. Thanks, Diane. Chris, do you have that mask sign by any chance? So one of the things that we're going to do is put up these mandatory mask zone signs in certain locations in town. And this is in response to the governor's order for face coverings in public places. So just to make it clear, around the common and in the village and at the DPW transfer station, we have to really emphasize that people need to wear masks. I mean, right now, without the vaccine, this is our best protection of stopping the transmission of the disease. I mean, it's just been proven to be crystal clear that wearing a mask really does help, and it will keep open the businesses and stuff as we just go into this really, really difficult time. Canada had Thanksgiving in October, and 2 weeks later, they saw this big spike in cases and stuff. So, I mean, really, the mask is the thing right now. We really have to emphasize. So you're supposed to be wearing them anytime you're out in public places, and certainly stores or anything like that. People know that, but it's kind of gone a step further, and it's no longer that, you don't need a mask if you can maintain 6 feet. Whenever you're in public, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. So we're going to emphasize that with those mandatory mask zone signs. A second thing I just wanted to bring up too is, speaking of parties, and Thanksgiving could be kind of a scary time. And the night before is traditionally the night when people get together and have parties and reunions and things like that. So Chief Quigley and I are co-signed a letter that we're going to send to restaurants, just to remind them, so that Wednesday night, that, Thanksgiving Eve, they have to, certain restaurants in town that have bars need to operate like a restaurant and not a bar. So what that means is that when people come in, they have to be seated and served food and drinks. There's no hanging around and, loitering in groups and stuff like that. You really have to treat it like a restaurant. So we just kind of emphasize to the restaurants, the rules as they stand to be a restaurant and not a bar. And, one of the latest rules also that came out is that people have to be out of there by 9:30. So we're just reiterating what the governor has said. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is just to make the board aware, the churches in town are planning on having a combined church fair. It's on Saturday, December 10th, and they will be coming before the board to seek permission. They've submitted a COVID safety plan to me with how everything would flow and how they plan to be safe with masks and things like that. So I've approved their plan. It still needs the approval of safety and fire and DPW and stuff, but it will be coming to you guys for the next board meeting.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions or comments relating to this community update portion of the agenda? Paul?
So just to reiterate for, Thanksgiving gatherings, this is key because there'll be a lot of people traveling and there'll be a long sit-down dinner with a lot of people. I would recommend, if you can, limit the number of people at the table, have it outdoors if you can, on the deck or out in the backyard if the weather's good. If you have to have it indoors, make sure the windows are open, limit how long you will spend in one room together. The uptick that we saw in Canada will happen here in the United States, and it's going to be a very difficult time after Thanksgiving. The number of cases will rise as you see across the country. They're going to rise here. I suspect we're better prepared, but just keep that in mind for Thanksgiving as well as Christmas. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right,
Excuse me.
Bob, Chief.
Though I said I wasn't going to say anything, I just want to remind everybody also about the travel order for the state. Obviously, a very fluid situation that the states you can travel to or from continues to go down. I think we're at 4 as of this weekend. So New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, and Hawaii are where you can travel from. Past that, you have to meet the requirements of the travel order that came out in August. You need to notify via the email or via the form, the travel form, the state that you have traveled. And you either have to quarantine for 14 days when you come back, or you have to have a negative molecular test, a PCR test, not the so-called quick test, the antigen test, but the PCR test. And the PCR test, just so everybody's aware of, right now, they are taking in anywhere from 3 to 5 days to get back the results. So if you wait till you get back to the state to have that test, you need to have it done, or you need to quarantine. And if you don't, there are fines, there are other things, but I just would caution everybody, if you are going to travel out of state, please review the travel regulations for when you come back. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to move right along to an MBTA update. So Chris, you want to start and then maybe pass it to Corey and Carrie, who I know were involved in the press conference yesterday?
Yeah, I'll just say that there continues to be regular coordination. There was a press conference yesterday, and Corey can talk more to that, and Carrie as well. We have Rob Jeffers, who was the chair of the town's Affordable Housing Committee, as well as a commuter on the ferry, speak. It was actually very well attended by the press. I don't know how much coverage it got. I did hear some people say they didn't necessarily see it at 5, but it did get out there. And the Facebook page and the web page seem to be doing quite well. They seem to be generating interest. And the next key date, which I know that Corey will mention, but I'll say it just to start, is November 23rd. It's a week. It's next Monday. There's a public session. If you go to that Save the Greenbush, Save the Boat webpage, you can click and be able to attend and register to attend that Zoom session just to share your comments. You can also send comments in writing, by email, or by voicemail to the MBTA about your thoughts on the closure of the ferry and the scaling down of the Greenbush. And those are all accessible through the website. That said, let me flip it to Corey and Carrie.
Carrie, you want to start?
Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic event yesterday. We had a very good turnout with media, and I did see at least several local news stories, both videos posted last night and some news articles written about it. Rob Jeffers did a fantastic job representing Cohasset in terms of affordable housing and as a fellow commuter. And we also had representation from Senator O'Connor, Representative Moschino, and Representative Kearney. And it was great to hear all of them speak as well. I really think it was a great event, but it's not enough to save what we're trying to save. And everyone listening tonight, we need your help. We need you to go to that website. We need you to go to the Facebook page, Save the Greenbush - Save the Boat. Please go like it on Facebook. Please go to the website. Consider attending these future Zoom meetings and consider making phone calls and/or writing testimony about why public transportation on the South Shore matters to you. for those of us who do commute into Boston, this is going to be a huge problem. It's going to have devastating economic impacts. It's going to have so much more added wear and tear on our roads, on our infrastructure. It's going to be adding so many more cars to the roads, adding traffic without having as much access to the ferry or to Greenbush. And just even thinking about the economic impacts of Boston, you know, we don't have the space for parking for all these people in Boston. So just thinking about how valuable these services are to residents on the South Shore, we really need everyone's help in trying to fight for this. Corey?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Carrie really, Chris and Carrie both kind of recap what happened yesterday. And yeah, thankfully we're in the Globe, we're in the Patriot Ledger, we're on ABC, NBC, CBS. That's been great. The one thing which has happened is we've seen a little bit of change in positioning. And I think that our pressure is being, I don't want to say successful, but is getting the ears of the people that need to hear it. And there's a couple numbers we've crunched, which are interesting, which I kind of want to share with everybody here. The first one is that the ferry is really not the MBTA's problem with the budget. The ferry accounts for 1% of the MBTA budget gap. The MBTA has said they want to save about $130 million. And the ferry would only account for 3% of that savings. So even just looking at what they're trying to cut, it's 3%. And they're cutting 100% of the ferry. They're also cutting 30% of the boat. Actually, the bus line that goes to Hull is being eliminated, but they're cutting 30% of the commuter rail and the red line, but 100% of the boat. The other thing that is interesting, and we learned today, and we've looked at some other documents from the MBTA, is that the ferry is known to be the most cost-efficient method of transportation. You don't have to maintain roads, you don't have to maintain rails, and the fare on the boat is a little bit higher than other places. So there's a number that's called fare box recovery. It's the percentage of money that is covered by fares versus what the MBTA has to cover. Fares cover about 70% of the operation cost of the ferry. And the rest of the MBTA, it's below 40. So this is a service that a lot of people love.
Right.
Doesn't cost the MBTA very much at all. Is actually the most efficient way to move people and the biggest money maker. And that's the thing that's being put on the chopping block.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to get that information out to people, because not only does it disconnect completely our neighbors up north to Hull, it's just a beautiful way to travel.
Yeah.
It's been around for, I think, over 40 years. I've taken the ferry a bunch of times to Boston or to Logan. It's amazing. It can't get lost. Chris mentioned that on Monday, we have a South Shore dedicated meeting with the MBTA Fiscal Advisory Board, and we need as many people as possible to attend that meeting. You don't have to speak. If you go to savethegreenbush.com or savetheboat.org, you can find a link to register for that meeting. We need everybody there. The other thing that's happening, Chris, I sent you an email if you want to pull up the image that I just sent you. We are doing a Ride the Ferry Day on Thursday, which is just, hey, if you take the ferry, but you're not going right now, or you like taking it, whatever, we're trying to get, again, there's limits to how many people can be on the ferry, but right now it's below that. We're trying to get people out on the ferry, the 7:30 a.m. ferry out of Hull or the 7:45 out of Hingham. We will have a media crew on the Hull ferry to take photos and video and do some socially distanced safe interviews. The boat is a beautiful way to travel, especially in COVID, because you can be outside. There's a lot of airflow. It's a naturally very safe way to travel. And we want people to show that they support the ferry by riding it. If you do participate or you do take the ferry at all this week, snap a photo of yourself, post it online. We've got Facebook, Save the Greenbush, Save the Boat is on a Facebook page, so you can just search for that, or post it on Save the Ferry. Easy to find us, and we really, really need this final push to make it known that this matters to us. We're paying attention, and we're not going to let it go.
Great. Thank you, Corey. Can I just clarify that the website is savethegreenbush.com?
It's Save the Greenbush, savetheboat.com.
Save the boat.
And
Thank you.
savetheferry.org, right? This is the problem. We'll get this
Right.
better the next time. But I think it's savetheferry.org.
Save the green bush, save the
I'm
boat.com.
checking. It's savethegreenbush, savetheboat.com.
Great.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. I was just reading about the ferry day. Thanks. Paul, you had a question and
Yeah, our U.S. Representative Lynch has been in touch with the members of the MBTA as well as the governor's office and has recommended to not have any cuts until a further potential federal aid to local towns and municipalities is worked on. And so he has already contacted with his thought that the likelihood of a second aid may go through. If that's the case, to prevent any cuts, he's recommended holding on that. So he's supportive of what we're trying to accomplish.
great. Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I also think that we should keep in mind that the MBTA is historically one of the most bloated bureaucracies in the state. And I think that if cuts need to be made, that the first thing should be to cut the low-hanging bloat before we take out the economic challenges upon the citizens who, after all, are paying all the bills through our taxes and through our fares. So I do think that we should urge the state to start looking at these problems because we all have, in one way or another, suffered. No, I hate to use the word suffered, but we have been impacted by this COVID in a myriad of ways, and many of them very significant financial. So I do think that it is worth pointing out and worth understanding that we're also dealing with unarguably one of the most bloated bureaucracies known to man. And I think we ought to be looking at that before we take it out on our citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to send, I think, just send your comments to all these websites and the Facebook pages, link you to places where you can register your opinions and ideas. The other thing I keep saying, Corey has heard me go on about this, but there's already congestion in the area, and it exists today. I commute to Cambridge and I sit on the Neponset Bridge even now when I understand, a lot of people aren't going into the office. I can't even imagine the toll it's going to take on people that are regular car commuters because for whatever reason they need to get back to daycare or they need to, they work in Dorchester or they work in Newton. It really is going to have ripple effects well beyond the South Shore and the individuals that actually use the MBTA. And we are going to get back to normal. So, any ideas and opinions, please share them and tell your friends to pay attention because to Carrie's or whoever said it, but I think we're going to make a difference. This is all we can do is fight with our words. Corey?
And just for anyone who's paying attention or listening, just for a little more background on what's happening on Greenbush. Greenbush is not going away. That train is still going to be operational the whole line, but we mentioned in the previous meetings, and it's worth mentioning again that any trains after 9 o'clock will be canceled, and there pretty much will be no midday service. So that's what Diane was referencing, that if you wanted to do a day trip into the city, and weekend service is out too. So if you wanted to use, Boston for anything other than in at 9 a.m., home at 6 p.m., there won't be a public transportation option for you. I live right next to the train, actually, and I'm a big fan of the train. And it's a safe, in normal times, very, very convenient way to go. It's very friendly for the environment. The MBTA has been working on improving the rail stock, including introducing electric trains. If we lose this momentum now, who knows what happens? I mean, we could lose 10 years of public transportation infrastructure by making these cuts right now. And I thank all the elected officials that have been pushing for, let's not make this call now, let's make it in the summer. We've got a vaccine, things are already coming back to life. It just would be a real shame if next summer we're looking at an opening economy and there's no way to get into Boston.
Does it need to work? Great. Okay, thank you. Stay in touch, spread the word, share the Facebook pages, and let's see if we can make a difference and sign up and register for Monday night's meeting. That's important, again, just for numbers. Great. Okay, next, Paul, you're next on the agenda, but I heard you might need to be later, but is that correct?
No, I just
You're-
signed on, so the timing is perfect.
Timing is perfect. Okay, you're ready to roll. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Paul Linares, our treasurer collector, for our quarterly investment update. And this is through September 30th, 2020.
Correct. So the town's investment returns are all positive for the quarter. Most of the returns through all the time periods are positive, which is a good thing. The expendable trusts are up 1.9 to 2.5% for the quarter. They're down 0.26 to up 6.36 for the calendar year to date. That's the only one that was even a little bit negative. They're up 1.9 to 8.9 for the year, 2.5 to 5.9 for 3 years, and up 3.4 to 5.7 for 5 years, and 3.2 to 4.6 since the inception. Permanent trusts are up 3.6 for the quarter, 1.8 for calendar year to date, 5.9 for the year, 6.1 for 3 years, 7.4 for 5 years, and up 6.5 since the inception. OPEB, those funds are up 6.1 to 6.7 for the quarter, 2.2 to 4.6 for the calendar year to date, 6.7 to 9 for the year, 6.1 to 6.4 for 3 years, up 7.4 to 8.4 for 5 years, and up over 5% since we started with them. So we've been doing, it seems to have been coming back. Our total investment for the quarter, our earnings are just shy of $800,000. So we're doing pretty good against our benchmarks, still running a little bit behind on a lot of them, but pretty close, above and below. So overall, I think we're doing pretty good.
And probably second quarter of this fiscal should be even better, because I know that the market's been doing better since September.
Right.
Kind of dipped down.
Fingers
so-
crossed. Fingers crossed, yeah.
Right, right. We need medical stock, especially these pharmaceutical companies working on the vaccine.
Right, yeah, but which one, right?
Yeah,
it's hard
exactly.
to
Right.
pick which one,
There is the game of finance, right? Investments.
right? right.
Any questions from the board on the investment update, Paul?
Are there any concerns, what you've seen as far as any individual of the trusts or any of the investments that concerns you right now?
No, none of they all seem to be positive, running pretty close to their benchmark. So there's nothing like out of the ordinary or cause for concern at the moment. We're pretty. We even with the legal list, we did have a bunch of the pharmaceuticals. So, but like I said, they're the portfolios are diversified enough, so there's nothing concerning at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Anything we should be aware of as we go forward, or just kind of stay in the course? And one question I do have, Chris, is a bigger question, just in terms of, bond counsel and the audit for the last fiscal year, any of those kinds of things that might segue us into Dawn.
Yeah, we do have some updates on collections, tax and fee collections through the end of the quarter that we just finished.
Yeah.
And Don has the updates through the end of October.
Right. But in terms of investment, we're just staying the course.
Yeah, the investments, as Paul has talked about, are in our permanent trusts and in our basically our OPEB and that. The reins were loosened a little bit last time, and again, it was just on a piece of our operations, and it's been beneficial. The OPEB money is still the funds that we can most aggressively invest, and they are more aggressively invested, and as a result, I think the return has been better, which is good. That's the long-term stuff that we wanted to grow. It just helps us pay down future expenses. So,
and we're going to have a
vast majority of our money is sitting in very low interest bearing stuff. Paula manages it aggressively, but when interest rates are below point,
yeah,
right.
What do you do?
Right. No windfalls, and that's probably okay. We wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right. Well, that makes the borrowing end of it easier too. The interest rates go the same way for that. So
that's right. Exactly. Great. All right.
Pros and
Thank you
cons and
very
everything.
much. So we're a little earlier. Oh, Corey?
I was just going to make a suggestion to move up the PEG HD channel launch issue. That way we can potentially get our budget update on schedule. Would that make sense to the chair?
Sure, I have no problem with that, unless if somebody, you want to make a motion, put that in the form of a motion, Corey, to
Yep.
move it?
I would like to make a motion to move the vote authorizing the 143 PEG HD channel launch to 7:41.
Second,
Okay, roll call, beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Stewart, aye.
Harry Thompson, I.
Okay, we're running very expeditiously tonight, Don. We're only doing that so we can, if people are tuning in at a specific time for your report, we want to make sure we're not in the middle of it. So, great. Corey, you want to tee this up?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for adjustment of the agenda here. I think the budget update's an important thing if people want to tune in. However, the motion to I'd like to bring in front of the board a letter that I would recommend the select board approve to sign to Verizon. The 143 TV Cable Advisory Board has had a conversation with Verizon about upgrading the public access TV station from standard definition to high definition. And Verizon has been very, very responsive to us, and we don't want to lose this momentum. The 143 board has approved this change. It's going to be in two parts. One, obviously, the quality of the station will be improved. You'll be able to see people's faces and read text now. But the other thing we've done, and this is really cool, is we've been able to get a different channel. So if we approve this, we can get our new channel to be 2143, which just is a cool number for our town. For 143 TV, it makes a lot of sense. So this is a really exciting thing that we've been talking about on the 143 TV side for a while. There are no downsides. There are no costs to the town. It's only good things. We all agreed that getting people involved and making information accessible is one of our top priorities. And broadcasting this right now, all of us in boxes, at a clear resolution is really part of that. We're working with Comcast right now to try to figure out a timeline to upgrade the channel for those subscribers. So this will only affect Verizon subscribers right now. If I'm here to take any questions about this, if you have them.
When would we have this channel up and operational and the HD service being delivered?
I don't have a timeline to give. I suspect a few weeks. With the holidays, it's probably because we actually have to do a physical change of equipment.
Yeah.
So Verizon has to come in, and the buildings are going to be closed because the holidays, that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
there will be. It'll take a few weeks.
Just a snapshot. Is it next June or is it sometime in the next
I
month?
wish there was
or
a
so?
switch. I'd hit it. But
Yeah, great. Well, also, I don't know about the HD from those of us that are on here, but whatever. Carrie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, we really have to up our game with lighting and everything if we're going HD. But Corey, thanks for working on this. I do think most channels now have an HD option. And, especially on Comcast, if you even try to go to a standard channel now, it usually will reroute you to the high definition. So this is the future and this is where we're heading. And I think it's excellent that we're pursuing this.
Great. Any other comments, Jack or Paul? Great. Corey?
Do we want to bring the letter up in front of everybody?
Do you have it handy, Chris?
Apparently.
So this will just be put onto letterhead, and if somebody wants to kind of summarize this in the form of a motion, we can do that after everybody has a chance to quickly read it.
I'll take a swing at making the motion when you feel everyone is ready, Chair, Madam Chairman.
And I will say, Corey, thank you for including the select board goals in there, because it really is important to kind of link everything we do to the policies and the priorities that we set. So I appreciate you putting that in that context.
One other question, Corey, and this might not be entirely related, but thinking about being more technologically savvy as a town, will this give people with either Comcast or Verizon packages the option to watch our channel online and not just on a standard TV set?
So I'm not sure about that. I don't know. So we are, the 143 TV board is working on a like a simulcast electronically.
Okay.
There is a little bit of a licensing question because our funding comes from an agreement which says we are to broadcast on these wires.
Right.
So we're navigating that a little bit, because I do agree that having, just like we're broadcasting on Facebook right now and the quality is good and it's easy to watch, we should have the 143 TV station be that as well. So that's something we are working on actively as a board.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. Corey, you want to make the motion?
Yep, I would like to make a motion that the Cohasset Select Board approve the letter to Verizon requesting an HD channel upgrade and a repositioning endorsement of repositioning our channel to the number 2143.
Is there a second? Okay, Paul, give a second. Roll call vote, beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Short, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right.
So just as a procedural thing, we can have that put on letterhead. Do you want to just have Diane sign it as the chair, or do you want to have all 5 of you sign it? We can have it posted somewhere.
No, I think if we just adopt it and we'll have it in the minutes. And if you have it on town letterhead, I can send that to the Verizon contacts that we are working with. And if they require further, endorsement, I will reach back out.
So just as a resolution of the board.
Yep.
Okay, we'll have that. We'll
That's-
have that. Okay, got it.
All right, terrific. Okay, we are ready for our FY21 budget update. So this is our monthly budget update through the month of October 2020. And I will turn the floor over to Dawn.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thanks for being here with us at night.
Sure. So like last few months, we'll run through each fund real quick. Kind of point out some of the highlights. Chris, if you don't mind, could you pull up the local receipt report? And as he's doing that, so far through October 31st, the general fund is looking in great shape. Overall, we're at about 43.1% of the budget collected. A couple of things that we take a look at: property taxes. You see 44.5% of the budget received to date. We took a look at where we were last year from a budget to actual standpoint. We're about 1.7% lower than we were last year. But then on the flip side of that, taxes for Q2 aren't due until November 1st. So we took a look at then commitments to actual collections through the due date, just 1 or 2 days later. And we're actually at 94.4% collected to date compared to 94.3% collected to date as of October 31st last year. So based on the budget to actual year over year for property taxes, even though it's a small decrease, it isn't anything to be really worried about based on what our collection rate is. So that's good news. Again, as we go month to month, we're going to continue to monitor all this to see if there's any potential issues going forward. Another big section that we look at, obviously, is local receipts. They continue to be trending in a good direction. Overall, they're about 23.6% of the budget collected. This continues to be motor vehicle excise tax. Again, their big commitment is not posted or received from the Department of Motor Vehicles until sometime in February. So from a budget to actual standpoint for local receipts, we're going to continue to see this low percentage, but it's really nothing to worry about. Motor vehicle excise is the largest driver of that. We do see that there are a couple items year over year when we look at the next page that vary. And to me, they're items that are expected. We're only down about 48,000 or 5% from last year. And they're drivers that we expected. Interest income is down. The meals and room occupancy excise is down a little bit. But then offsetting that are increases in penalties and interest due to some tax liens that we collected, that Paula worked through collecting. We're also up about 77% or 87,000 in license and permits, hugely driven by building permits. So people are continuing to renovate and do projects to their homes and require those building permits. So overall, on the revenue side, I think we're doing really good through October. and we'll just continue to monitor our progress.
Yeah, and I just want to comment that the delta we're looking at is year to year, and we budgeted less for FY21, knowing, you know, that we would be probably down in motor vehicle excise tax and other local receipts. So, you know, these are important numbers to compare, but it's more comparing to the year to year trending, you know, the actual to budget. So.
Absolutely.
Good work. Any questions on the receipts, Corey?
Yeah, Don, thanks very much for the update, the regular updates. These are quite useful to kind of keep it, you know, ahead of us. One question about the meals and room occupancy excise. I do know that Red Lion's been pretty much closed since the beginning of this. Do you have any sensation about how much of that delta is due to that one institution, or is it kind of really spread out across all like restaurants? Because it's really just restaurants. I mean, Harbor Inn's not having people. So outside of the Red Lion, I don't think we have any other occupancy excise that I know of.
Right. I think the majority of that decrease in meals and room is spread across all the entities in town.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the state
They collect.
does not provide that level of detail to kind of tell you, you know,
Okay.
what areas or industries, or even, you know, restaurant to restaurant, or
We just
hotel
get
to
a dollar
hotel.
figure. Okay.
You just get the check. Yeah.
Unfortunately. So it's really just kind of based on assumptions of what's going on in town. I mean, I think a lot of the takeout has probably helped
Right.
to not see that number tank totally.
Right.
On the flip side of that, though, the revenue that we're seeing right now is through only one quarter. And I think this was a receipt from September, which I think I explained last month, has a little bit of a carryover from FY20 because of the governor extending the due date for the fourth quarter FY20 meals and room tax. So again, it's something that we're watching. We did level the occupancy budget this year. Wasn't a large revenue source anyway, but we did bring that down to zero. Based on the next 3 quarters coming in at where we expect, based on the first quarter, not factoring in any potential of last year, that first payment, we should be in line with the budget. So something that we'll continue to monitor, but I don't think it's going to be a large issue of our collection. I feel like I went a roundabout way on that one, but
Yeah.
sorry.
Paul.
So Corey, one of the things the state does when the taxes come in for basically for room and meals is they try to shield the individual proprietor from knowledge from another proprietor. So they try to blend that so that one hotel or business has an advantage over another when they see dropping revenues of an individual business. So it's a little bit shielded. You can get it from town to town, but most of it is tried to be shielded to some extent.
The question, though, actually, it's probably not for us to discuss now, but it is curious. I would be very interested to know from the business community, you know, what their expectations are. And, you know, not necessarily the town asking that, but maybe there's an opportunity for surveying through chamber or through our economic development. Just, yeah, Corey, just to get a pulse on
We've done
where
a
do
lot of
people
that.
think we're heading. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, the one thing that, you know, for the businesses that did respond, and I'm not going to say, you know, the majority of businesses did, you know, but, you know, for the fair number that we got back, you know, revenue, it's nothing's uniform. You know, restaurants are largely doing okay outside of increased costs. Meanwhile, services, your gyms are gone. And, you know, retail is kind of in between. So one of the questions the reason I asked Don this is, you know, restaurants in town, the town has been, it seems, pretty supportive of the restaurants we have in town. And that's a pretty big drop, that 30%. But if that story is also because we have what is a very large part of our smaller town dropping off the map, then the rest of it doesn't seem quite as worrying.
Right.
But the sensation that I get is, you know, increased costs are really the biggest thing, as well as finding employment. or finding employees.
Ease, yeah.
A lot of people left and haven't come back. But again, especially with the holidays now, please do, if you can do takeout, do it. If you can buy locally, do it. Every dollar you spend on something gets shipped to your house is a dollar that's leaving our town and not coming back.
Right.
And we've got some really great little shops with people that have located here in town. And, they make a kind of an agreement. There's a contract between us and the town. They're not in Quincy or Braintree where they could have 4 times as many customers. They've chosen to be here. And we can show them thanks for the effort they put in by just being a customer.
Nicely put. Now expenses.
Sorry, I was just taking a look at when we collect our next quarter meals tax. So just back to that point, Corey, I think it'll be really telling when we get our second quarter FY20, and then we'll really have a good idea of where we stand with some of the stuff on meals tax. On the expense side, 35.2% budget spent. A lot of that is employee benefits and transfers within the individual departments and the function lines, general government, public safety, not really seeing any issues. Part of public safety, you kind of see that trending a little bit higher as a percentage. That continues to be kind of our bucket for COVID. Within emergency management, I have an account that I pretty much charge anything that is COVID related to there. So within that, there's about 225 to 250. I took a look again at the numbers of COVID related expenses that will be reclassed to various grants. So with that being said, all the departments are in good shape at this point. And yeah, just like everything else, we'll continue to monitor this weekly and monthly and to provide the updates to you folks.
And just for clarification, Don, because I was taking notes, the COVID expenses that will eventually get reclassed, those are they're within this expenditure sheet you're showing us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just honestly easier to track it in one spot. Yep. And then as we get a little bit more information on FEMA reimbursements and just the grants themselves, it's just easier to just do a larger reclass based on the big spreadsheet that I maintain.
Yep, makes sense. And what about just in terms of public safety, Chris, just, overtime and everything, is nothing remarkable?
Now we can pull up the financial analysis where we track.
Hold on, let me do that.
Corey, do you have a question while they're pulling that up?
I do, and Don, I just wanted to ask you, I probably could have asked Chris too, but do we pay any type of fees to MBTA or some state level of government for the fact that we're connected by public transportation? I know that Hull does.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we do. We do?
The answer is yes, we have an assessment.
And how much is that? Do we have an idea?
Let me pull that up.
Because Hull is like $250,000.
The fact that we have a train station is a big impactor of that.
Right.
And is also, even Norwell pays something, by the way, to do with your connectivity. But the fact that the station is
Oh, if they're cutting 30% of trains and all the ferry, I feel like,
Yeah.
we're out some money here.
All right, bear with me just 1 second while I get that figure.
Right. So let me pull these. While Don's looking, I'll show you so right now, police overtime is about where it was last year. And last year we had, some people out for a while. This year we've had COVID.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Yep.
And then fire is actually down. I mean, the good news is that, we had upstaffed purposely, actually starting to show in our decreased overtime. So by having more folks on a regular shift, we don't have to call people back quite as often. And it seems to be having a positive impact. So, obviously things are, and you can see, and for fire, it's been down every single month. And again, with police, it's a little different. I mean, we've had some moments where we've had folks out, and with police and fire, you have to have a minimum number of folks, minimum staffing levels. With fire, we're a little more fungible. With police, you got to put people. We've been perpetually, and this was a decision that was made for economic reasons a number of years ago, where always down one on the overnights. So if it gets staffed, it gets staffed. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Partly because people come with long-term benefit costs and overtime doesn't. It's a one-time expense. It's real, but once it happens, it goes away. It doesn't recur. It doesn't have OPEB expenses. Does that kind of answer your question at this point, where we are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Done.
Corey, I took a look at that on our cherry sheet. We have about $188,000 of cherry sheet charges for MBTA. Any other questions on the general fund?
Nope.
All right, we can move on to water, Chris, if you don't mind. Water continues to be in good shape as well. Taking a look at their revenues, they're about 28.3% collected. On a user charge basis, they're still in good shape as well. It appears to be lagging behind budget, really due to the timing. When you look row 4 and 5 of the revenues, town hydrant fee and hydrant distribution charges, part of the budget, which has not been committed or billed yet. And that's usually done, I believe, in the third quarter. So we really won't see those until after the new year. But so based on that, we're trending in the right direction to date on water. Year over year, we're still up about 246,000. And as noted in prior months, it's largely driven by usage charges based on increased use.
The dry summer.
So yeah, revenues are great. General expenses continue to be lower than budget. Yeah, I continue to kind of harp on how well water has been conservative with their budgeting. 29.2% of general expenses through 4 months. And that has to account with a few extraordinary maintenance expenses for some water main breaks and stuff like that have continued over the last couple months. And so they're continue to be in great shape.
One of the things with the board that Chris and I have been talking about, and Carrie, as we look ahead at agendas, is trying to at some point have some kind of a committee forum. And it's impossible to have everybody at the same time, but I think it's really important for all the different boards and committees to hear what each other's doing, because if you're working on Elm Street Corridor, we talked about this last week, and you're talking about economic development, you're talking about the harbor, you're talking about water, you're talking about sewer, and trying to have these conversations all together to the extent that it's possible. And one of the things that we're going to be doing probably in 6 weeks is really ramping up for the FY22 budget. And last we left the water, there was a discussion about having a rate increase. And I think we need to start having that conversation again about what that means for the future. Why, when you see good results and good numbers right now, it seems like it's running very efficiently. Why would we want to entertain a rate increase? At the same time, there's obviously capital issues. So to the extent that we can have those bigger conversations, I think we need to do so sooner rather than later, as we, before we get really deep into the budget cycle.
I agree. I think that's will definitely be important, and especially for resident education as to why. Your last comment really hit it on the head. It's largely driven by capital projects and the need, as well as their operating and budgeting well. There are many capital needs in water that essentially justify the rate increase, but without understanding and explaining those to the general public.
Right.
I agree.
Goes
So
nowhere.
Jason and I are actually going to be meeting in a few weeks to kind of go through the initial study, all the data, take a look at capital and where we are with some of we're almost there with retained earnings. So I'll have that update a little bit later in the presentation, but we're definitely gonna be working on that and working with the water department in the next few weeks as well.
Great.
To try to fine tune that before we bring it to the public and start going down that process.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'll let you keep moving.
Sewer, please, Chris. Sewer, same thing, continues to be heavily moved by usage charges because they're based on water. They continue to be up year over year. The budget is at 30% collected, which again, factoring in the sewer liens for Little Harbor. Again, those are kind of similar to some of our other liens and betterments in town that aren't billed or committed until the third quarter, sometime in after the new year. So they continue to be in great shape year over year. They're also well ahead, 170,000. Usage is up as with water, and fees also, which relate to connection fees. They've had some new hookups this year that have attributed to that increase. And then on the expense side, they're actually 26%, which is great at this point. Sewer is definitely the department we're really trying to stay on top of budgetarily, just from being so close the last couple of years. So it's really good to see that they're only at 26%. But again, kind of with water, anything could happen. So any issue with the sewer main or the pump stations or anything could change that. But seeing it at 26% right now makes me happy. Any questions on sewer?
Thanks, I muted myself and didn't. Okay,
So we did want to share, we've been talking about the year-to-date collections. If you want to just see where we stand on the various aspects, and I know we still have Paula out there if she wants to comment. She created the charts. Here, I'll see if I can blow them up.
Paula, come into view if you'd like.
Yep.
So you can see. So this is the. They're a little hard to.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can see that we're green this year, Paula, correct?
Correct. Green and then blue for last year. So you can see, you run a little bit behind, a little bit above or something like that. And if you look towards the middle, you can see the fiscal year we landed like dead on 99.0% for both years. And then starting off this year, we're a little bit behind the first quarter, second quarter, we're just a wee bit ahead. So the collection rate is pretty consistent. For each of the quarters, despite everything that was going on. And then this chart here is just telling you that the amount we're billing is pretty much the same. The green line is a little bit above what you would expect with the 2.5% increase. So that, you don't expect that to vary too much, but you expect the green to be a little bit above last year's line. So there's nothing really outstanding there. The motor vehicle, that gets a little bit more sporadic. This is more on a calendar calendar basis, because that's how motor vehicle billing runs. We typically get, we issue a large bill in February, the very beginning, and it's due the beginning of March. And then from there, it gets a little bit more sporadic. We could get the next bill. It could be, any time in March, or, sometimes they run behind, sometimes they run ahead. So what you're seeing here, this large variation here in March, it was actually this year we got the bill. However, that's when everything started to go crazy, and we didn't issue the bill right away. So in the previous year, we had issued the bill. So as of March 31st this year, we had only issued the first big bill and collected a good chunk of it. But last year, we actually had just issued the second bill, and we hadn't collected anything because it wasn't really due. So that's why you're seeing that huge variance. But then by June, you can see, we've caught right back up again. And at this point, we're a little bit behind where we were last year on collections. But again, that could be the timing of when we issue bills and when they're due. So I'm not really worried about that because of that, for that reason. And you can see that it's a timing of the bills. If you look to the chart to the right, again, what's important is that at the end of the year, and this you want to look at the end of the calendar year. So if you look at 12/31, you can see that the green line is above the blue line. And although now this year in March, the green line is below the blue line, certainly by September, it's back up above. So we have billed slightly more this year than we have last year. But we'll see. We've been kind of losing ground since the beginning of the year. So we'll see how it ends. If you look further to the right, I have all the commitments that have been issued. It's not the full year yet, but you can see that we are, we've billed $10,000 more so far this year than we have last year at this time. And we actually have issued fewer bills. But that trend changes too over time. So like if you look at, the counts there, where you see the 302, the 281, those are the bill counts. We actually issued 302 bills this year, 281 last year. But this year's 300 bills was less than last year's 280 bills. So people are buying smaller or used cars.
Yep.
So as you might imagine,
Yep.
and there's also like an uptick in the number of people buying them too. And I think that has to do with people not wanting to be an Uber or public transportation, so they're buying inexpensive cars to get through this.
Right. And again, this is an area we budgeted down, I think 15% or something
Yeah, good
year over
job,
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what you see in here now, what I had to say, I mean, like this year,
Wow.
look, I mean, all the green is up above a little bit more than when we were last year, pretty consistently this year, which is nice to see. So the collection rate is up, and the billing is pretty close to where it was last year. But it's ending up, if you look to the far right into September, we're a little bit ahead now. We're breaking away. The drop there is this is a fiscal year to date. So after 6:30, it goes back down to 0. See how the first bill come out. And then for sewer, it's pretty much the same story, actually. So the collection rate has been, pretty good, a little bit better than last year, pretty consistently. And it looks like the sewer bills started off a little bit behind the green line, under the blue line, but that has turned the corner this year. You can see the green line is slightly above the blue line for the bills that we've been issuing. So nothing dramatic going on there, which is good news. Everything is kind of holding steady.
Excellent. Carrie?
Thank you for that update, Paula. Someone reached out to me a couple weeks ago about they were trying to pay some bill online. I'm not sure what it was, but because it was a couple days late, the online system wouldn't let them pay it. Is there a way that we can adjust that or fix that? I think that considering that, people are struggling, that it's safer to make payments online. Why won't the system let a payment be made even if it's a couple days late? It just seems like it's maybe not helpful right now.
Well, you can pay bills late, but sometimes you get caught in this timing because we take the file down because we've got to set it up to issue demands. So
Okay.
it may have been just like a couple of day time period where they tried to pay a bill, but typically we put the bill out and then we can tell Unibank how to calculate the interest,
Okay.
how to calculate the interest out to. But instead, we just cut it off at some point to go ahead and issue demands. And sometimes there's like a day or two there where people can't get online, but they still can do it by dropping money into the Dropbox, or if they wait a day or two, they'd be able to pay it again. But usually they get hit with the demand at that point. That's what's going on. We're adding to the bill.
Okay. All right. We might need to discuss that more at some point.
Okay, no problem.
Corey?
Yeah, I want to kind of build up what Carrie was saying. I mean, one of our boards and one of our goals and things that we've talked about is just making our technology infrastructure easier to access. And I personally find the bill pay system a little bit challenging to use. So I'd love to, have sometime in the future, just exploratory conversation about other ways, other services we might use to make that whole process a little bit easier.
I second that, Corey. I think it could be a lot more intuitive and easier to use.
Yeah, I also have not been a fan of Unipay or whatever it is. It strikes you as unwieldy. And if I were in the private sector and they were handling my source of income, I'd be talking to them very seriously.
So Chris, is that something you want to just kind of discuss internally first and just see what our, what options might be? And then maybe, we can.
Yeah,
come
and
back
absolutely.
with-
We're always,
I mean, I would imagine it would require, a change of services and budget and whatever. But-
something we can always look at. I mean, one of the challenges on the government side, remember, is that we have to collect 100% of what we bill. So if you pay with a credit card online, the merchant's taking a haircut of, usually 2, 3, 4%. We can't do that. So when you're paying your tax bill, we're collecting 100% of it. We don't share that with anybody. So a system has to be established to charge you a fee. So all of them can't do that. And there's also some security features. That said, we're always happy to go look and see what we can do. We want to make things as easy to do as possible. Obviously, I think it makes everything easier.
There are other vendors that do that and work with municipalities. I live in Bridgewater, and that's a different one there. I don't particularly find that one any much better. I mean, they originally had Unibank and they went to this other vendor, Invoice Cloud. But we can look at it and see if, and maybe other ones out there as well, that we could take a peek and see if we think that they're going to be better and move things over to that if that's what we decide to do.
Yeah, and Paula, just so you know that if we have criticisms of Unibank or whatever, it's not of you. We like you.
No, I understand, but I mean, the other thing too is they don't charge us for that system.
Okay.
And they only charge the customer a quarter to do
Yeah.
electronic check. And I can tell you
Right.
Invoice Cloud, 40 cents.
Yeah.
There's another one, City Systems, and I'm not sure how much they charge too, but I think Unibank is one of the cheaper ones. And they do allow you to pay by electronic check. And they also do some of our back end stuff for some of our other online systems that are not Unipay, the different front end. And they don't charge us for any of that too. So we get a lot of stuff for them for free, including the software. So, I mean, that's one thing to consider. Don't expect a super slick system because they're doing it for free to get the deposits. That's kind of.
Oh,
the
come
aim.
on.
Right. Well, just, take the comments because, it is a little
Oh, yeah,
clunky and just let us know if if there's anything we can help with. So.
One of the challenges on government side financial stuff is that it's rarely, unfortunately, cutting edge stuff. I mean, it always seems to lag, and
Understatement.
believe me, it's a frustration. Government sides, and you think, I mean, look, we all use Word, right? So that works the same for everybody. We all use Zoom. I wish we could all use the same financial stuff because it would make life a lot easier for us if we didn't have to use the stuff we use. That said, it's always a good idea. And thank you for raising this for us to take a look and see what we can do better on this stuff. We always hope that people will get into the industry and shake it up a little bit. I know Microsoft at one point tried to get into the whole industry on the government side, and I don't know if they found it lucrative enough because it's still a little bit of a niche. And one of the challenges on the financial side is that every state is different. When I was doing this work in New York, the chart of accounts there was different. So in Massachusetts, it's different yet. So when you make a product, it's not like you'd sell it 50 states. You got to tweak it to the different states. But even the collections are different. I know that sounds crazy, but the rules on how you collect some of this stuff are different state to state as well. That said, we'll look at it. But if anyone have any thoughts, please forward them on. If there's any product you think we want to look at or a vendor, we're happy to keep an open mind and see what we can do.
Great, thank you very much. Corey, and then we'll wrap up and move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chris and Paul. I mean, if things happen so quickly, I mean, in the last 5 years in technology, every year it's 10 times faster, it's 10 times more complicated, better. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to just have if you guys could spend a little bit of time to, hey, here are 5 suppliers, here's their benefits, and then, we can just kind of have an open discussion about whether we want to spend the time and effort to change anything. Thank you.
It's funny that you bring up the speed at which change happened when Chris was saying Microsoft tried to get into it. I said, and I'm thinking in my head, they probably weren't patient enough to wait for, a municipal government to make up its mind or go to town meeting and ask for a new system. So timing is always a challenge in this business we're in.
And just to keep it in context, we are going to have to take a look at our financial software at some point. I mean, we've been using SoftWrite to Don's credit and Paul's credit. They've made it work as best as possible. That the owner of the product, it's been bought a couple of times. is uncertain as to what it's going to do. And we've been waiting for, every time I see these folks, and I haven't seen them now for a while, no conferences or anything, they keep telling us, oh, don't worry, change is coming. And it's been 3 years. And we're like, okay, where's the new product? And so, the Munis, and again, I want to go deep, but Munis is like the big gorilla, the 500-pound gorilla, and it's owned by a much bigger software company. It's a very big system. It's a very expensive system. It does lots of things. There aren't enough competitors. I mean, we really wish there were. So we're going to have to take a hard look in the next year or two about our back-end financial system entirely. And I think at that point, it's going to be really critical to see what integrates, right? We want to make sure everything integrates nice and smoothly. And, so it is something I promise you. I know Don's not super excited about having to have that conversation because he's got everything to work. But
Right.
Software's going to run out. I mean, what we're using as well as we can is a system that was designed probably 15 years ago. And as Corey said, that's prehistoric. That's Paleolithic. That's Paleolithic time here. So we're doing stone knives and bear skins,
And when we got it, when Cohasset went to SoftWrite, there was a lot of meetings, a lot of controversy about it because at that time it was semi-dinosaurish as well. But Chris, is there any opportunities to procure these kinds of things on a regional basis?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we've been having ongoing, and again, unfortunately, the last 9 months kind of locked up a lot of these conversations, right? Everyone just pivoted to COVID. Ron was leading a lot of really great conversations with his regional colleagues and with the state. And the state had actually been going out and doing some procurement work on this stuff, not just on this, but other softwares as well. Building permitting one was one that was really hot. We actually went to a good product on that. But we looked at a lot of our neighbors and all of that. So financial software is something we've talked with our neighbors about it. And if it's something we could do on a regional basis, it would be a lot easier. And we could procure them, we could support each other, right? So if we have a question, rather than have to wait for the help desk, wherever they happen to be, we could just call our neighbors. Hey, we're having a problem with X piece of, what can you do? When my prior community bought a piece of software to run a 311 system, one of the reasons that we bought just the software, it had an incredible user group. And we were able to talk to our colleagues in other parts of the country and troubleshoot and build off their experiences. And that was as valuable as the software itself. So we are going to have to look at this. And again, I'm hoping that as we come out of this crisis, the state of Massachusetts has really done some excellent work on IT. They've really done a lot of collaboration with state and local governments. Again, unfortunately, it's all kind of taken a side seat because of our back seat to the COVID crisis. I'm hoping that as we come out of this into the spring, that they'll start, putting some more resources back into those kind of questions. Because, we're, at the end of the day, we're a great community, but also a tiny little place, right? We're a very dynamic 8,000 person town, one of 351 cities and towns in the state. All by ourselves, we have little leverage. Together, we have great leverage, and we have. And I think that Ron was leading a lot of great conversations. It's how we did the GIS upgrades. It's how we did our security upgrades. And I think the financial upgrades is something that as we kind of pivot to the new year and Don has a chance to breathe when we get through some of these grant challenges that we'll be able to procure. But again, I do think that we'll kind of want to have some input and maybe there's some really bright people out here in town who own software companies who want to break into the government market, create a new cool product. That would be awesome.
Call Chris. Don't email him. Okay, Don, anything else? Did we get through everything?
Just a couple other quick updates I'll leave you on. Free cash retained earnings is going through a cycle. Our DOR rep Martin has done his preliminary review and has sent it up the chain of command. So I'm hoping to hear back on that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
It preliminarily, and I don't think it will change because usually the DOR rep does a pretty thorough job before it gets reviewed. But I think we're looking at about 2.2 million of free cash, about 1.3 of water retained earnings, and about, I think it was almost 300 of retained earnings for sewer.
And this is FY20.
FY20. So we're going to be looking in really good shape for this upcoming town meeting to continue. I know that we're not having a special in December at this point, but we're going to work in a special at the annual to do our trust fund additions and And then going into our annual town meeting to have that flexibility is going to be great. So that's good news. We also just wrapped up the recap. That's being submitted to the DOR for review. I think Mary Quill had mentioned that this is the earliest that we've actually gotten this submitted to the DOR since she's been here. So that's really good news considering everything everybody's going through and all the additional COVID work that has been put on people. So that's exciting. And I felt like I have one other update that's escaping me. The audit, they are working on it. We just got one of the last pieces that they need for audit adjustments.
Okay.
I was talking to another colleague, and it sounds like some of the communities may be held up because of the pension reporting. So I should have a better idea in another couple of weeks when they may be done and wrapped up with our audit.
Great, thank you. And can they complete the audit without the certification from the state?
Yeah, that has, yeah.
Nothing,
No problem.
two separate things.
Yep.
And then lastly, Chris and or Don, do you have a sense of the FY '21 state budget? Do we have any idea when we're going to get those numbers?
I did talk to Senator O'Connor yesterday briefly at the press conference on the MBTA cuts, and he gave, and I did check the cherry sheets the other day. So both the House and Senate have introduced their own versions of the budget, and they're pretty much online with what the governor had proposed in his revised budget about a month ago. So they seem to be on target, and the impression I got from Pat O'Connor was that they look like they're on target to adopt something. Now, that's for this year. It's kind of harmless on state aid and all that. Next year, FY 2022, is a whole different animal, and we just don't know what that's going to look like yet. Our fingers are crossed, but again, I wouldn't. We're not going to worry too much about that. No, just to be clear, normally we would be looking at a state revenue summit in December for 22. They haven't even adopted a state 21 budget yet.
Exactly.
They're way behind, and by the way, understandably so. So that's going to have an impact on our planning. So again, we had talked a little bit about that last meeting, and we'll talk again in the future. I think I'm leaning more and more towards recommending to all of you that we do a little bit later town meeting. When I say later, I mean like late May or early June, just to buy us a little more time to figure out what's going on at the state level. But I expect, it looks like they'll probably have something. I know they're they're shooting for before Thanksgiving. So, I mean, fingers crossed they'll have
The
a
week, yeah.
budget adopted at least by the end of the month.
Okay. Jack has a question, and then I want to move us on to, you're done, Don, right? Sorry about that.
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
very
work. And Paula, thank you as well. Jack?
Yeah, very briefly, Chris, you touched on something. We have some grants that are up in the air, like Treats Pond, which they may not make the deadline. So what risk does a town undertake if we don't meet that deadline? And the state basically kind of starts running out of money and does not renew these grants.
All the grants that we have in place for the state now are engaged. In fact, I just signed contracts today on the money for the Seaport Economic Council. So all of the grants that we don't have any state money on Treats Pond. That's all local money. So all the state funds that have engaged, we have engaged with.
Okay.
Time limits, obviously, we have to spend money within a certain amount of time. And even the money from the state for the 250th was engaged, so I was committed. So we have that. So so at this point, we haven't. I'm not aware that we're actually behind on any of the state grant opportunities. We're still waiting on a couple. We haven't heard about MassWorks yet. That hasn't come down yet. I'm happy to give the board any other updates. The COVID stuff does expire. We're actually working on that very closely. That money expires on December 31st right now. So we're in a sprint to make sure that we make sure that's all done. And that has to be not just encumbered, that actually has to be
Spent.
Delivered, I believe, by the end of December, right, Don?
Yeah, so it's not just ordered by December. We have to receive the good and or service by December 30th for it to be eligible. We have time if we receive that good or service by the 30th. I think we have until March to pay the bill, but we can't just order something right up until the end if we have any extra money. So we will be over the next few weeks making sure that we plan accordingly.
Well, we should look at this because I've spent a lot of time talking to the various factions and Treats Pond, and they're of the impression that there will be some kind of grant that will run out. So if they don't get this started by sometime in December, that money would have to be reapplied for, and the permits would have to be reapplied for, and of course that would be to the extent that they're close to getting a resolution. So maybe we should go over this, offline.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Chris, we'll talk and maybe get it on a soon agenda so that we can actually have a conversation
Yeah, or
about it.
Chris, you could give me a call and tell me what's going on, because there's a lot of concern there. And it's too deep to spend a lot of time on a Board of Selectmen's meeting.
There are permits. I mean, again, I don't want to belabor this, but there are permits that we're going to lapse, not grants. But you're correct, Jack. There are some permits that we'll kind of have to re-acknowledge. So that's definitely a public conversation the board is going to need to have. And I'm happy, Jack. So
yeah,
we know it's a good time.
Yeah, I want to keep
Okay.
us on agenda if we could. Thank you very much. Thanks, Don and Paula, very much. And I welcome Tim Davis and Katie Dugan from the Post-Employment Benefit Committee. Thanks for being here to give us an update and remind us of the work we've all done collectively, and you have spearheaded and guided over the last couple of years.
Hey,
Tim,
Tim,
you're on mute. And we'd love to hear from you.
hey,
Tim, you're muted. Let me see if I can unmute him. There we go.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Thank you, Select Board, for hearing from the Post-Employment Benefits Committee. I would also like to thank the members of the board, Mark Maggi, Donna Collins, Paul Carlson, and Katie Dugan. We're here to give you a brief update. We would like to make this a regular update. One of the things we need to continue to keep in mind is that the unfunded OPEB liability continues to grow, even though we have a plan in place to hopefully bring that to zero. But at the moment, that unfunded liability is over $40 million, which is not a trivial amount. I'm going to ask Katie to go through the slide deck or the slide page that we've submitted. But the two things I'd like to leave with you are, one, stay the course, help us with making sure that the budget, both at the town meeting budget and the any of the additional cash at the end of the year, is appropriately funded to the OPEB trust fund. And also to keep in mind that the biggest and most important part of our whole strategic plan comes when the pension fund, the additional pension fund money is completed, and the OPEB receives at least 50% of that additional payment. So please keep those in mind as we go forward. And with that, I would like to invite Katie to take us through this brief presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. And just before Katie starts, I just want to say, when we did our budget message in October, our commitment to funding or contributing annually to the PEB account was very much a part of that message. So
thank you.
Great. Chris, can you share just the one page? Thank you. So again, to keep this brief, there were three things that we wanted to talk about tonight. One was the funding policy. The second was an annual OPEB report that we'd like to start, and then also just some quick committee goals for the fiscal year, which is already a quarter underway. So as it relates to the funding policy, Diane, it sounds like you guys have covered this off in the budget message, but I think all of you know that the funding policy that was adopted by the select board last year was a two-part funding strategy, which included an annual funding target. And then, as Tim referenced, when the Norfolk County Pension Fund reaches fully funding, that catch-up payment that we've been making until we get fully funded, a portion of that 50% will go towards OPEB funding. And with that two-pronged strategy of an annual funding target and the future catch-up payments, we believe we can get to fully funded within most of our lifetimes. But,
Katie.
Jim, you're going to be around in 2042, and we're going to have a glass of champagne. So the most important thing is to kind of stay the course as it relates to the annual funding target. And so for fiscal 21, that annual funding target is $515,000. The good news is that we actually approved $165,000 as part of the budget process that was adopted at annual town meeting. We do need assurances that out of the undesignated fund balance that Don was referring to, it's getting certified, that an additional $350,000 is appropriated out of free cash flow. And we are assuming that will happen at the special town meeting that happens as part of the annual town meeting in May or June of 2021. But as we get ready for the budget process going forward, part of the annual funding target was the fact that we recognize that a static funding target was not going to keep pace with the increase in salaries associated with our, or the increase associated with the healthcare expenses. So we budgeted a 3% increase. So our target for FY22 is $530,000, assuming again that a portion of it is in the budget and another portion will be appropriated out of free cash flow. At special town meeting in the fall of 2021, we're looking at a combination again of $530,000. So again, it'll be up to Don and to Chris to propose a number, but if we're looking at the same kind of mechanism, it would be around $180,000 in the FY22 budget. So that's what we're asking for, is to stay the course as it relates to the annual funding target, $515,000 for fiscal 21 and $500,000 for fiscal 22. The next part is we started last year, actually in February and March, putting together an annual report for the Board of Selectmen, which talked about a number of aspects related to OPEB. And due to COVID, we never really were able to come forward and present our work. And frankly, by the time I got to the fall, it just didn't feel as important as everything else we were tackling. So we are, again, going to prepare an annual update to the Board of Selectmen, and we'd like to come back in January and present that to you. It's a short 2-pager, but it, I think, will help us as a community kind of track the key aspects as it relates to OPEB. Those being our funding policy, our investment policy, and how are we tracking relative to our fully funded ratios. And so that is something that once the actuarial report is available, which should be in the next month or so, the PEB committee will meet, we'll review the actuarial report with Don, and then begin updating and drafting a short annual report to the Board of Selectmen. So stay tuned for that, and we will be back on your agenda just to kind of hit home again to the community and to your board, sort of the magnitude of what we're talking about in terms of the unfunded liability as it relates to healthcare expenses.
Katie, just if you don't mind, just a quick question on the actuarial report, the KMS report.
Mhm.
Is that something we should be doing every 3 years, 5 years?
So Don can correct me, but I believe at this point we get an annual actuarial report, because in the past it wasn't actually on the balance sheet of the town, but
Right.
since the GASB accounting changed and it's actually on the balance sheet of the town, you get an actuarial report every single year. Now I believe there's different levels that the actuarial report goes to. And I forget whether the cycle is every 2 or 3 years, but there are some things that are not updated as in detail. But you do get a liability that is calculated with all the underlying assumptions annually now.
Great,
Yeah, it's
Don?
done every 2 years, a full valuation.
Yep.
And
Okay.
in between years, it's essentially a roll forward They take your updated fund balances in your trust funds if you have it, any assumption changes. So the liability will change year to year, even after a full valuation. But as Katie mentioned, because we need this for financial statement purposes, we do get an update every year.
Yeah, just get right. Get a
And I
focus.
believe
Alright.
this year, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, is the full update, not just the roll forward, or did I get that wrong?
This is a roll forward year.
Roll forward year, okay.
Yeah.
For most people, including myself, that subtlety is is lost as you go through the volume of the actuarial report. But anyway, what we're really hoping to do with this annual report is just keep it front and center in front of the community in a way that tracks visually, like a lot of the reporting that Don and Chris have done, and for the community, so that people understand in big picture terms. So that's what we're doing with the annual report. And then last but not least, we have a couple things that actually have been kicking around as committee goals. One is relooking at our charge and make sure that we're structured as a permanent committee. I know we've had this conversation before and it kind of got lost in the COVID and the pandemic. But again, we like to look at that charge and make sure that we're positioned to be a committee that is around and speaking to the community and to the select board as we go forward. And then there is a small a detail that's been kind of pending on our goals, which is looking at the OPEB trust fund in terms of the legislation that the trust fund is managed under. We established our original trust fund back in 2013, and that Mass General Law still is viable, and we continue to operate the trust fund under that. Under the Municipal Modernization Act, which came forward in 2016, there were a number of things that were updated as it relates to financial operations of the state. And we just want to do a quick comparison between the previous Mass General Law, which is currently governing our trust fund, and the slightly updated version under the Mass Municipal Modernization Act, to see if there's any benefits. And again, it's more of just a small nit, but something that we've had on our list to do for a while. And that is it in terms of the update. So really, we're just asking you guys to commit to the annual funding target as you go through the budget process for fiscal 22, and to stay tuned from us for a full update and report out on the OPEB liability once we've had a chance to analyze the most recent actuarial report.
Great, thank you very much. Katie, quick question on the analysis that needs to be done to compare the MGL and the Municipal Modernization Act differences or deltas in those two. Is that something the committee can do, or is that something you would need somebody else to do, or?
I think it's something the committee can take a first stab at.
Right.
You know, it's something that we did when we looked at the special education trust fund. That was a little bit simpler in terms of the comparisons between the two. And I know that we've talked with Paula and with Don about going out to their respective professional organizations to see if anybody else has taken a look at it. So we don't expect to have to hit hard in terms of legal fees to look at this, but this is really more of an internal look.
Great. Okay, good. And we can certainly talk next, at another time about recharging and discussing whether to go forward with a permanent standing committee.
Yeah.
I would just like to thank you, Katie, for doing that. I also want to thank Paula and Don for their great assistance to this committee. One thing that we should all as a community, both as the PEB committee and the select board, keep in mind that if we stay the course here, we are going to end up with a OPEB trust fund that is in the $40 to $50 million range. That is going to take a different perspective in terms of an investment policy than other funds we have in town. Number one, it's going to be larger than any other fund we have in town. But number two, the call on those funds is long term. So we really need to say, okay, we need to focus on this, and how do we do this in a way that is both responsible and in the best interest of the beneficiaries of that fund. as well as the entire community. So we will be back to you again with more suggestions to how we do
Great,
it.
and I think that's the kind of discussion we can have in the context of a committee and, permanent committee in the charge. So I'm going to turn it over to selectmen questions. Jack?
Yeah, by the way, Tim, that was an excellent point because the investment strategy will have to change. And by the way, I really think everybody in town should be aware that the intricacies that this particular committee has been dealing with, and we're very fortunate that we're getting some pretty good expertise. And thank you guys. Thank you a lot. One question that I get a lot around town is people, they really don't understand it, but what they do want to understand is they ask me, well, what is the cost per employee or per $10,000 of employee salaries for what the town, the town's obligation? And I've looked through some of the things. I haven't been able to find it. Is there a way we could find that? It's something that I think citizens really want to have in a way they can readily understand.
Are they asking about the OPEB liability, or they're asking about the cost of healthcare?
They're looking for, well, both actually. And some of them aren't aware that they're asking for both when they're asking for both. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to put it in terms of what does this cost per employee? What is this, or what does this cost per $100,000 of employee salary? So they can understand it, because the $1 million figures, their eyes just glaze over. So I don't know if there's a way we could easily get that. I assume that we can, but I just have a number of people that asked me that. And I tried to find out and I couldn't.
Jack, I mean, we did, when we put together the initial recommendations, we did have a slide that talked about healthcare benefits, and it split it down between active employees and retired employees. And it kind of laid out the number of active employees we have on health insurance, and the number of retirees that we have on town healthcare. And then it gave a split of what types of plans those employees were on and the annual cost of those plans. And then it talks a little bit about, obviously, the split in terms of the what the town pays for and what the employees pay for. So I'm happy to send that to you, and that may answer some of your questions. And if it doesn't, you and I can talk offline, and we can certainly get
or we could ask Don to just give us a figure and figure it out. People want a simple thing that they can understand.
But I think
OPEB is definitely not simple. So I think what
that's why I asked you, Don.
what Katie's referring to, I think, is a good start.
Yes.
And then if we can't get it from there, I think we could circle back, as Katie mentioned, offline to get a little bit deeper into maybe what you're really looking for.
Yeah.
Because it's based on actual cost. There's a split between employee, employer, but then the actual liability is based on mortality tables and a million other things. So I think starting with Katie's
There's
presentation.
there's the fully in, operational costs for employees.
I'm just
and then there's sort of
I'm just the
long-term.
messenger. Please don't shoot the messenger.
But I think the point that we did in going through this, all the background when we pulled together the initial recommendations, was trying to ground people in some of the facts in terms of what our healthcare plans cost in total, so that people have an understanding of the expense relative to salaries. And so I'm happy to share that with you, Jack, and then we can talk more about how to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Yeah, Katie, just, sharing, if you could maybe get a link to the OneDrive to Tracy, that way, we can all look at it to the extent that we want. Any other questions from the select board, or we'll move on? Great. Tim, Katie, as always, thank you very much for your really hard work and thoughtfulness in bringing a very complicated, complex matter into some of our simple minds. So much appreciated.
Okay,
I wish
great.
you could go run the MBTA for us, actually.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Katie.
Katie, go do it.
Or ride the ferry on Thursday, if nothing else, right?
I love the ferry, so.
We all do, right. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Next up, we have a vote authorizing signatures on approved licenses and permits. We touched upon this last week, but was it last week that we met? But basically, in December, when we renew all the permits, there's probably over 100 of them, and normally all 5 of us sign it. So this would be, and Chris, you can fill in any blanks that I leave. This be a vote to authorize any one select board member or the town manager to sign off on an approved by the select board license or permit, so that we don't have to throw 100 different pieces of paper our ways for individual signatures. Is that right, Chris?
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I'll just pop up what Special Counsel Lamke drafted, which he had already done in Hull. Move to authorize any member of the select board or the town manager to sign up any documents relative to any and all licenses issued and or approved by the select board or unrelated matters. So it's only for items that this board approves. And again, this is a really, you already approved this for liquor licenses. So I've been signing off on those when the board approves them. In this case, as Diane points out, in 2 weeks, you do the annual renewals, and there are, I mean, as any of you have, the only person who hasn't experienced that is Corey, right? There's just a shaft of paper that just moves along the desk. And we've been successful in getting folks all of you to come in to sign off on individual documents, or us to circulate a really high priority item to all of you by the police. We're talking about literally, hundreds of pieces of paper, because some of these documents are like triplicates and stuff. And so this would obviously only go to things that the board's approved. And whether it's me as a default or any of you, I mean, if you want to rotate how you do this or who's available, that's fine. But we just want to make it easier, particularly with what's coming up in December. And so this could, once you're all back to normal, you get the privilege of signing your document again.
Since we're not present. Corey, you had a question?
Yeah, I've got, just basic kind of non-specific governmental concerns about this. I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to, instead of doing it, universally, just do it case by case? So we can do a motion and then we can do a follow-up motion to say, we authorize a single signing of this. It's a wall that I'm a little bit uncomfortable taking down this far. Just because there's some, we've done things a certain way for a long period of time. And I do like the convenience of it, but at the same time, I can foresee just some questions about what was actually voted on and what was approved and that kind of thing. So can you?
So the thinking behind that, if I get it, all of these we have to vote on anyway. So it would just be maybe a double motion, right? That when we're doing used car lots, motion to approve a used car lot license for the following businesses and to enable any member of the select board and or the town manager to sign off on these. So that's what you're saying at the time.
Correct. That would make me a little more comfortable, because then the board would really know we've approved it and we've approved that we're not all going to sign off on it. That, I think, for clarity's sake, makes a lot of sense and doesn't introduce too much additional hassle.
I think if we did that with the buckets that we have, at the time of, I think that makes that I would certainly be fine with that. I think it makes sense. In other words, not individual licenses, but maybe individual categories, because we can't motion 120 different individual licenses or we'd be here all day. You know what I mean? So we would be doing all these common victular licenses, and we read them, kind of roll through them, and then we'll do a double motion at that time.
Yeah, I agree with Corey.
Yeah, Paul, Paul's our parliamentarian.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We vote originally on it. So there's going to be a vote, there's going to be a second, there's going to be a confirmation. I mean, I don't really care whether you do it, but if you do individual licenses, there's probably 200 and some odd licenses that you're going to be your double motion on. I would recommend do it as a category if you want to limit that. But honestly, this is only going to be for the time of the, the public health measure that's in place. So You can do it by category or you can do it individual. Individual is going to take a long time.
Yep.
I'd recommend categories.
Yep, Carrie?
I really see no problem with doing this. Actually, I'm going to have to disagree with Corey and Jack. If we're all voting on these emotions anyway as a board and are being transparent about that, I don't think who signs it right now during a pandemic is that much of a problem as long as someone is signing it.
Mhm. Okay. I'm kind of lukewarm too, Paul.
I mean, we'll all be responsible because of that motion that we're going to allow someone to sign for it. So we're all, it's one signature for the 5 of us. So it's not as if this is not legal or unusual. This is, and a lot of motions you can do that for, making a amendment or something for the board. You can do it with that. So this is not unusual.
Okay.
But I think we can do it, is what Corey's simply saying is that in the process, and we could do it as a category, and I agree, we don't want to go on forever on that. But I think what Corey is really saying, that if we delegate our signing authority, we should do it specifically at the time, and we could do that. We can incorporate it in the motion that we approve and we authorize the signature. But I think that's a kind of a, basic good government transparency step. And I think it easily can be incorporated with a bucket or category thing at the time. So it's clear on the record that the select board has in fact authorized this particular way of doing it.
At the time of the
Simple.
meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Corey, do you want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll need some.
Or just
assistance
not?
from
No,
Just
somebody.
move on?
if I might, for just a second, Diane, you
Please.
don't really have to. I mean, if you're gonna go with that route, which is, by the way, tough,
We just don't have to take action tonight.
right. You don't have to do anything tonight. You could just, I mean, this would blanket it and you don't have to do it again.
Yep.
If you want to do it bucket by bucket, then you just hold this and it becomes a tool that you use as you need to.
Yep.
So that's what you want to do. You don't have to do anything tonight.
Okay. And then
It
I
seems like-
recommend, yep, I recommend we move on. I think that I don't think it's necessary, but I certainly understand what the idea of doing it at the time, and I endorse that. So why don't we move on to the next item on our agenda?
Just make sure you have this with you at the next meeting.
100%, and I'll make sure that we have the appropriate language too, and how to go about doing it properly. So we'll
Yeah,
we'll-
I might try to pull something together only because you're all in different places. So so all of you have the same kind of standard motions in front of you. Because normally we would do it in person and it's easier to share that way. It's sometimes harder to do it.
And normally we get a printout of the categories and then the listing of the various licenses. So we'll get that ahead of time and we'll work the motions, and maybe we'll just ask one member of the board to make all the motions and make the seconds so we can expedite it.
And you've historically kind of rotated them, like one person does one pack and one does another,
And then we get silly and somebody
Yeah.
crazy does it, right? So
But
we'll
you don't
try to
have to
keep
see,
it.
it's gotta be faster this year because you have to sign them all.
That's
So
right, right.
we'll go faster because
It'll be right.
that's usually half an hour of the meeting as you.
Well, and yeah, normally we, build the whole meeting around knowing we're going to be there for 45 minutes doing this. So I think we'll be able to be more efficient and get other stuff done. Okay. Moving right along, the next item is the town manager update. And it's so funny because we have here the power outage National Grid. And when I looked at my agenda this morning, I thought that was like 3 weeks ago, but it really wasn't. It was 6 days ago.
Where we live in, it feels like every day feels like a week sometimes.
It feels like a month.
So I actually just got an update from Chief Sylvia a little while ago. National Grid actually determined that there was a failure in a line that was it apparently caused by some branch of some tree somewhere that broke and then knocked out what appears to be a fairly substantial amount of their system that fed the main feeder line that comes in from Norwell. So it affected part of Norwell too. What happened, according to the timetable I've now been given, is that again, just about 7 o'clock last week tomorrow on Veterans Day, 3,590 customers in Norwell and Cohasset were knocked out. 47 minutes later, they were able to restore half of those customers. They've upgraded their switching technology, which is good. So they were able to redivert. They were able to, within an hour, appears that they were able to take some of those back up. And then another hour later, they restored all but 300 other customers that were right around the break, which was up on Chief Justice Cushing Highway at Pond Street. There was that's where some of the main damage was. And then it took them it looks like another hour and change to restore everybody. That said, it was what I would consider a blue sky event. And now it wasn't literally a blue sky, it was at night, right? But we weren't in the middle of a storm. There was no raging winds or howling rain or anything like that. And the system failed. Now I realize that branches can fall. That said, it was frustrating to say the least. I actually asked for a comp. We actually had a call. We all talked the next day and we went through what happened. And the public safety had to be called out because this affected all the traffic lights on 3. We don't have a lot of traffic lights in town, but it affected all of them. And those are 3A it gets dark early, and you suddenly find yourself in the pitch black at 7 o'clock, and the road's full of people, even if that was on a holiday. It turns out that we incurred about $1,000 worth of police overtime costs out of the public's. Most of that was police overtime costs because of folks having to be called in on a holiday as a bonus, right? To direct traffic and do other public safety issues. I am intending, unless the board wants to direct me otherwise, to send National Grid a letter that says, A, we're incredibly upset about what happened. It shouldn't have happened. We want to understand more in detail what you're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. And B, we'd like a check for $1,000 and change for the expenses that we incurred for this. We shouldn't have to. This was not a storm-related emergency. This was not a hurricane or a blizzard or anything like that. It was literally just a random event in the middle of on a holiday, of all things, that cost us over $1,000. And that's just the cost to the town. It affected a lot of other people too. It affected everybody, right? I think Kerry was in the middle of a class, right? People were in a lot, and all of a sudden, boom, you're out of power. I know there's a great level of frustration for everybody. So if the unless the board objects, I'd like to send a letter and say, hey, this is not okay. And by the way, here's a bill.
And I would like the select board to decide whether we even need to do this, but whether we need to be also signatories to that, and whether we're going to direct Chris to. I think it needs to be very strongly worded. When we were doing the agenda last week, I was extraordinarily frustrated because it wasn't a holiday for a whole lot of people who work, and Carrie was working, I was working. And if this were a unique kind of unusual event, it would have been frustrating, to say the least. The fact that it happens always, it just seems like we lose our electricity more often than we should. I know Hull has taken some very strong measures. I'm not fully versed in what they're doing, but it involves lawyers and lawsuits or petitions. And I really think we need, as a community, to think about, how we can pressure a very large utility company to take care of their infrastructure, take care of their capital expenses, because that's why it's happening, because they're not tending to their equipment. And to Chris's point, it was a beautiful night and they were able to restore power within 45 minutes. But again, at a great loss of people's dinners or their work or whatever they were doing at that time. And again, it happens all the time. And I just feel like we need to put pressure on them to address these matters. Corey, I know you had your hand up, and I'll be quiet, and then Paul.
Yeah, I'm before we send a letter to anything, I mean, I'd like to learn more about kind of what legal contractual obligations National Grid has to us. I know, at least from the cable TV side, we have contracts for our rights of way, and at a certain point we signed our rights of way power contract away to whoever National Grid was whenever this happened. So I'd like to have town council or somebody review what that said, what our legal rights are in this area, because we can send a letter complaining, but really if there's no teeth to it, it's just going to go in a bin. And it's pretty ridiculous. And I think the town needs to start thinking about what the other options are, if there are them, and we need to understand kind of where we are first.
other than strongly worded select board meetings. I see everybody wants to speak. I'll go to Paul next.
So yeah, I understand that there's a, with a legal, aspect from the town, but this is 4 times in 3 months, that
In the middle of a pandemic.
And it's in the middle of a pandemic, everyone's working from home, okay? And it's pissed me off enough when I come home and the lights are out and I've worked hard and I come home and there's no power. This is the 4th time in 3 months. This was an hour, and it was during a holiday where apparently most of us work. I was working, and I was, trying to contact the hospital through the internet. I lost the internet for a few minutes, got it back on because I have my own generator. But I'm sorry, that this is infrastructure problem. This is maintenance problem. This was not because of a high wind dropped a branch in the middle of Norwell. This is maintenance to make sure there are trees that are cleared from the right of way. We have a contract with National Grid to say, we need electricity, we need power. And I honestly don't care whether the town council gets involved or not. I think we ought to send a letter. I'm sick and tired of National Grid giving us the runaround when they say, oh, it's because something failed here. I don't really care. You need to have power, and you need a consistent, dependable power. And you got people working from home, and this is an extraordinary situation. So I say send a letter. I don't care whether they send it back with a lawyer's note saying we're not going to care about it. I don't care.
And I think we've talked frustratingly for years about it and have done nothing. Carrie and then Jack.
Yeah, I think Diane's point is well taken about possibly teaming up with other towns and maybe being a bigger force here to get them to really answer to why they're not maintaining infrastructure. This is ridiculous, but I understand that we as a small town who kind of is beholden to them for our electricity don't necessarily have as much power as we would if we were able to team up with some other towns and be more of a force. I was teaching a class during this time, got totally cut off, tried to get on through my phone, and then I didn't have enough cell service to get back onto Zoom either.
We don't have that
And
either.
I have my students in Boston are like, where do you live? Like, what kind of town do you live in where you have no power and no cell service on a 65-degree Wednesday night? It's just, we're all, I think, at our wits' end because of everything else going on. Yes, I want our $1,000 back, but I do think we also have to strategize about how we can best deal with this.
Yeah, I think that's where we can do both. We can make a strongly worded letter and ask for $1,000 back as a municipality, but as a community, we need to do what Corey says and really start looking, pulling together facts and figures and data points and figure out and teaming up with other people and figuring out what kind of noise we can make that might actually affect some change. Jack?
Yeah, I'm incensed. I do think that the number one, we have town council, Paul Dorenzis, on retainer. I think we should find out what options we may or may not have. That's, we should do that anyway. But I do point out that we are contracting as individual consumers and the town to a service that purports to offer us something. Now, that doesn't offer that for me for what I need. The number of people in town who have been forced, as I have, because I operate a fairly sophisticated business out of my home. I need power. I have to have it. I have to have for a variety of reasons. And when I do not have that, it'd be one thing if it was, every couple of years, but 4 times recently, there's no expectation of power that I'm paying for. And I'm not paying a lesser bill than somebody that has power all the time. I'm paying for services not being delivered. It's cost me a substantial amount of money because I have to have a generator. And I can tell you, as you look around in this town, the power goes off and then you hear the generators start. Fortunately, I have an automatic one, but think about the people, the elderly and the shut-ins who don't have a generator, or they may have a generator, but they have to go outside with gasoline. And we don't want that. So they're not maintaining the service that contractually they've offered. So I think number one, we need to have our town council see if we have an option. And number two, a strong letter. We can't let, I'm done with them.
We all
Take care
feel
of
the
figuring
same
that
way.
out.
Right. Well, I think about, to your point, we all pay for, 30 days of service every month, right? So I want my 6 hours of that back. And I also want what I lost in my refrigerator, times the 4
Yeah.
times it happened, times the, 4,700 households in the town of Cohasset, times. I mean, you start to talk about aggregate numbers and maybe you can make a difference. Paul, you raised your hand again.
Yeah, and it comes down to, the well-regulated monopoly, and it's not being regulated. They're not being enforced to make sure they deliver power. They're not being, forced to, whether it be with fines or with, I don't know, however you want to regulate a monopoly. There's one line coming into town and it's National Grid. It's not like we can get, buy a new car and there's 18 different kinds of cars. This is their job, is to supply power at a reasonable, dependable service, and it's not.
Right, Corey, and then we'll move on. I think we're making our points clear.
Yeah, totally. But just an interesting kind of note that everyone should be aware of, and this came up in alternative energy, is that the contract with National Grid prevents us as a town from putting power across roads. So we can't hook up, town hall to the solar array. We can't hook up schools to something that's in, in another location.
Right.
And that's actually a really big issue for our town, is if we want to build, local generated infrastructure, local power generation, we can't connect to our buildings because of this same contract that is also not giving us what we came here for. So just another data point.
And I think that's
You
the
could-
bigger policy discussion we need to eventually have. Chris, and then
Yeah, I don't want to jump in. So I do just want to underscore, though. I mean, it's not fair to say the town is doing nothing, and I say the town, I mean collectively everywhere, right? There's been, the town won these 2 microgrid studies. They're ongoing, and the authorization for the solar, RFPs. The AEC is coming back to this board on December 1st to talk about those solar RFPs and potential, and make a recommendation for some potential awards. So I do want to understand that and again, this is the disconnection, or I should say the restoration of Cohasset or improvement is not going to be it's not going to be an easy process. And the town has been actively working towards a better day. Now it's going to take time. Paul set up his own little baby microgrid, right? He is a microgrid. So, and unfortunately, that's what happened in a lot of other places. Now, we found a very significant challenge at Elm Street, right? We have a generator for the community room, and if power goes down, it's all electric heat at 60 Elm. That's our complex for the housing authority. If power goes out, we used to put people into the community room. Well, we can't do that now in COVID, right? What do we do? So we're having a lot of conversations about what we do this winter. How do we handle that, right? We can't power every single building with a generator. So we're looking at that. That's a conversation that we've already been having. And those are the people who are most vulnerable completely, right? I mean, some of them can go to other people, some of them can't. So we're assessing that right now. And, Jack pointed that out too. These are people who are extremely vulnerable. The single biggest challenge we have here is that National Grid owns all the poles and wires. The single biggest difference that Hingham and Hull have is they manage their own infrastructure. And as a result, Hingham and Hull have very little problem with wires in their town. Hull's problem is that the transmission lines that connect are from the 30s, and they're on poles that are towered by trees. When they were in 100 years ago, the trees weren't that big. Well, what a surprise, they grew. And National Grid has refused to raise the poles to a level that would put them above the trees or cut the trees down, because it's going to cost money. Well, you're right, it's going to cost money. The infrastructure that Cohasset has, and we've been investigating this for some time now, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Now, I will say, again, I'm only finding this out today, and that's one of the most frustrating things for me too, is we asked about this immediately, and it was I'm like, how did power get back in 42 minutes? I'm like, I mean, it was great, but how did that happen? Well, it turns out they've made some improvements, but they haven't shared any of it with us. We've been asking to say, can you improve the grid? Can you find ways, since we have multiple ways of power being fed? If something goes on one line, can you flick a few switches? And by the way, there's actually switches on the top of those poles and redirect power. Well, it turns out they did. Well, that's great. It would be nice if they told us, right? And they didn't. They even did something, it sounds like they may have done something good and they couldn't even tell us that they did something good. That's one of the biggest frustrations. And it's not the people. It's really great people we deal with. And I hate to sound like I'm, championing, about the corporation. National Grid is an international corporation that couldn't pick Cohasset off a map. It doesn't care. And we're not even a rounding error on their balance sheet. And that's the most frustrating.
Right.
That's what drove Hingham to buy Aquarium. Now, I'm not suggesting that Cohasset is at the point to buy the poles and wires and do its own thing. But I have to tell you, we're most certainly moving in that direction because I don't. And by the way, I will do everything that the board wants me to do, and we'll talk to council, we'll get together, and we'll talk to our representatives. At the end of the day, it may be that the town has got to go its own way on this, and it's not going to be cheap. But I can tell you that these are one of those things that electricity used to be was Boston Edison, right? And the people lived here, and the owners lived here. National Grid is based, I think, in England. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that they don't care. Cost doesn't matter, right? There's no local person who cares. I mean, there's staff members who we work with, and they're very dedicated, but they have the limits. They're only given the powers that they're given by the ownership. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm ranting here. This amazing corporation do amazing work, and there's lots of great people in town who work for large corporations. In this case, though, we don't even regulate it. That's the other frustrating thing. It's not at the state level. The town has literally no power. The DPU is, I sat through the hearing when we did electoral aggregation, very formal, very structured. And that was just for the aggregation piece. That's taken, a year to get just that piece. That's just the supply end. We are having conversations. I've talked to Diane and Kerry, and we're going to keep moving and talking. The AEC is a group of incredibly talented people, and we're going to continue to tap those resources. And again, they're doing some really great work on this microgrid. Again, it's not going to be tomorrow, but the work that's being laid, I think, has the potential to transform how Cohasset can provide for itself going forward. But again, I believe me, I'm straight as everybody. I live next door where we lose power too, and the whole town goes up
Yeah.
And it's
I think we're just all super frustrated, clearly, and I didn't mean to imply at all that we've done nothing. I mean, this was a selectman goal 3 or 4 years ago, and we were chipping away at it a lot. We've established a lot of good relationships with National Grid people, so that we do have conversations, but it's just a bigger nut that we have to find a pathway to crack. And I think at this point we need to rely on our great committees, that alternative energy, and some of those discussions we need to discuss amongst ourselves, sort of larger policy implications going forward. But right now we're all kind of ticked off, and I think we need to just send that letter off and then start looking at other ways to really push a different discussion forward. So Paul, you had your hand up. If you want to still speak, and then we'll move on.
Reinforce, this is another reason why we should go to a microgrid system in the town. And the only difference with that and a standard grid is cutting across right of way. So you'd have to put in 3 or 4 microgrids in the town and just say, you know what, we'll lease the lines when we need it from National Grid, and we'll run a microgrid in the town, because this is just, this is not a way to run a town. To keep the power running is how you want to keep the town running. That's all. Done.
Great, thanks, Carrie.
Real quick, I think this is great. We're going to plan on holding their feet to the fire, but I also think that we have to also do that with companies like Verizon and AT&T and our cell service companies, because we can't go through a winter where people have no power and then no cell service during a pandemic and no place to go. So I'm just adding some other big corporations to add to our list.
You're taking up my mantle. That used to be me. It's like, it's one thing to lose your electricity. It's another if you live where you have no cell service. So
by the way, that is,
which is half our town.
I'm glad you brought that up, Carrie, because we're in this perpetual conversation with, there's 3 big providers left. That's all, right? It's Verizon, it's AT&T, and it's T-Mobile Sprint. I'm not sure what they're calling themselves these days. And they don't talk to each other particularly. They don't particularly care. And we have some dead spots. We know that. Again, that's also regulated at the state level. So we yell at them. I mean, I think Diane had a cable, probably may still be down for all I know, right? A loose Verizon cable that was, laying on the ground.
2 years across my yard.
And if we could go cut it, it would be great. So we cut off everybody's service. They just don't care because, and short of setting them on fire, and I don't really want to recommend doing that. You kind of
That's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor. So we have we had a problem by the way, on this outage. To circle back for just a second, we rely on AT&T's generator to power up our emergency radios. It was a deal made because it's at the water tank up on Bear Hill. For the second time in a year, it failed. It failed last time because AT&T hadn't managed it and they ran out of fuel. We don't know why it failed this time, but we had to have somebody go up there and they pushed and they were able to kickstart the damn thing and it gets our radios back up. So we're talking about how we need to move away from that or do other backups because we can't rely, and by the way, if AT&T has a few customers that are pissed, they don't particularly care. If our police radios aren't working, that's a life safety issue for us. So we do have another backup, by the way, on Turkey Hill. So, we have options and, so that we went right to work on that on Thursday morning. So if we have to spend some money to get some battery packs or something done, we're going to get it done this winter. The good, we actually found that that's a continued failure. AT&T is not working with us and, we're going to work with them. So Carrie, your point is very well taken. And I do think that, just like with the boat, public pressure matters, right? I mean, maybe some kind of a campaign, and it's not just us, by the way, I drop it too, the phone will just drop out randomly in Hingham, drops out anything along the water, you're going to lose signal. And it doesn't make sense in 2020 not to, and again, it's a safety thing. It's not even just convenience, right? It's literally safety. People who want to keep their landline, Verizon doesn't care anymore anyway. They're not going to do it. They're yanking them out. So it's not like you have a choice. So, again, I do think that the community engagement is what's going to matter here, is to put pressure on these folks and say, at the state level, where the regulatory agencies work, and also on the social media level, and say, hey, it's not okay.
We're becoming advocates. Jack, you had your hand up. I'll give you the last word and then we'll move on.
Yeah, first of all, Diane, if that had happened in Maine in your backyard, we would have cut it up and sold it for the copper, but that's a whole nother.
But that would have been criminal because we don't own the equipment.
I know, but they don't care about that in Maine. I do think seriously that we are going to have to face that underground utilities are really it's capital intensive in the beginning, but then the maintenance goes away, you get reliability. So this is something that we ought to be floating around sometime in the future. And I don't want to get into it now, but just in the future, that should be part of the thought process.
We actually talked about that today at the Elm Street corridor meeting.
Yeah.
So great. Thank you, everybody. Chris, anything else?
Two more quick updates. One, just a reminder that next week is Thanksgiving week. I don't believe, but it is Thanksgiving next week. Town Hall, the library, and the senior center will all close at 1 on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's what we usually do. We're going to be closed on that Friday. We'll reopen for business on November 30th. That's that Monday. The transfer station is going to have its regular hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you get rid of all your leftover turkey carcasses and everything else, and your grass clippings and whatever else. So that the transfer station will be open, but the town itself will be closed as normal from 1 Wednesday through Monday morning. And just one last quick thing. So Brian Joyce is working on that regional sewer, getting a firm to do that kind of decision matrix. We're exploring a couple of options to get input from folks about the matrix options, and we've plugged in. One thought is to have kind of a stakeholder meeting on Zoom, representatives from various boards. I believe, Carrie, I think you're still the sewer liaison on this, at least you were. We can do something like that. We can have a public session, just do a public Zoom meeting one night and have people participate. And we can also just kind of do some outreach and, for example, touch all of the members of this board and say, when the firm is selected, here's some key questions we need to answer. Can you give them, what are the issues that you see here, so that we make sure we're capturing the input from the boards who have to make decisions to make sure that the matrix that comes out has answered some of the questions. So, at this point, we're leaning towards some kind of a public session, I think, at which people can participate in, and we will most certainly also, solicit direct input. So whether it's a quick short survey or to this board, the sewer commission, the master plan folks, water planning. And if we do a quick public meeting one night, structured, right? People can just come on Zoom and share questions. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that sounds good. I definitely think it should be an evening meeting so that people can, as many people can attend as possible. And, have maybe a few people on the panel, obviously Sewer and some of the, Brian Joyce, et cetera. So that sounds like a plan.
Okay, so we'll probably do something in early December. Because at this point, we're not gonna have Thanksgiving week's just kind of be a lost one. So, and we'll do something in the evening. And again, we'll make sure that there's opportunities for people to give comments through email. And if people want to send a letter in or something, they can do that too. So, goal being to, again, we pulled up some other material. I found some other materials the Sewer Commission had done about 5 years ago. So we've kind of pulled that all together. So the firm that looks at this will be able to just pull this all together and say, here are your key issues. What do you want to do?
The indicators, great. Okay.
That's it.
All right, thank you. Select board comment. Jack, you want to go first?
Yeah, one thing I mentioned earlier about Treats Pond, I think we should be aware that there's there are 8 people whose approval is needed to get this thing done. They're having some discussions, which I would urge all 8 to move forward, because our Brian Joyce has worked on a very good plan. It will put that pipe much further out. It will not have to be dug out. And further, some of the property owners, one in particular, whose property is needed to send the backhoe out to open up that pipe, if this is not done shortly by this year, he's going to deny I understand, I haven't talked to him, he will deny that anybody to go out there and open this up. So I urge all the people there to put aside their differences, get this thing done. It floods Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue becomes unpassable. It's been a long thing. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Corey?
Yeah, just 2 things. Again, MBTA, the meeting for us to be heard by the MBTA is Monday. Please Save the Greenbush, Save the Boat. Go to savethegreenbush, and register for that meeting. Secondly, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but I want to say again, thank you to Chris and his staff. If you go to YouTube and you search for the Town of Cohasset, not all of them, but a lot of meetings that have been on Zoom or have been recordings, are now available for you for free whenever you want. If you want to learn about something, you can go to the Cohasset YouTube channel. I also wanted to mention to the chair here that I recommend that in the beginning of your speech, you say the meetings can be reviewed later on the Cohasset YouTube channel.
I will add that to my script. Thank you.
That's great for people to learn about how the town operates, to get some history on stuff, and just a good transparency tool. So thank you to Chris and your all staff for that.
I will just riff on that I had somebody in town send me 5 different YouTube videos of meetings that were queued up to the point at the meeting that person wanted me to pay attention to something. So that was a fun Friday night at our house. Paul?
Thanksgiving coming up. Just be very safe in traveling. Do your best to not have a large Thanksgiving. Enjoy it, and just be safe. That's it.
Carrie?
Yes, I want to repeat what Paul just said. I actually just heard that Zoom has extended their 40-minute free amount of time for people this next week, so people can have Zoom Thanksgivings without there being any time limits. So what Paul said, try to be safe. Also, go to the website, savethegreenbush, and as people are starting to do holiday shopping, please frequent our local businesses. Buy gift cards. Restaurants and businesses are really encouraging people to buy gift cards to be used at a later date. It really helps them with business. Amazon doesn't need your business. Our local businesses do.
Ditto to all of that. You mentioned last week some kind of a Cohasset card. Is that likely to come to pass?
Yes. So that is actually, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
However, we're putting out a call for sponsorship. We need a little bit of funding to manage the program, to market it, and we're also trying to build a little bit of a kicker. That way people are encouraged to participate in the program now. So please, if you love our town, please consider reaching out to become a sponsor of launching of the Cohasset card.
That's great. And I think my remarks earlier, I probably should have held them for this part of the meeting, which is basically just like for the first time, as frustrated as we all are with everything, the first time I see a little bit of hope. I think the vaccine news is very promising, and I feel like we just got to get over the finish line. Maybe we're in the red zone, in the football red zone, and you know we can get someplace and celebrate real soon. So with that, just again, stay close to home, and hopefully we can be celebrating together in person before not too long. That is pretty much it. Thank you all. We have some minutes from October 6, 20, and 27. Oh, and on the minutes, Jack and I have spoken, and we've spoken at meetings before, and I've been jumping into a number of other committee meetings, and I think minutes are something that we need to have a larger conversation about, and making sure that committees have the support that they need to record, you know, the actions at their meetings. And now we have all these recordings. So we are going to tee up a future conversation, most likely with town council, and just discuss really what's needed, what can be done, how to expedite it, where to find support for some of the committees that are managing their own agendas and meeting minutes, which frankly is something that I've really wanted to work on for a long time, because there's some committees that are shouldering enormous material, like alternative energy, for example. And, you know, and I think as a community, as a town, as municipality, we need to try to find as much support for properly making them feel supported in the work that they do. So stay tuned on that. And then if anybody would like to make a motion on the minutes that are listed and were in our packet.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of 12/1/2020, Board of Selectmen, Select Board, Cohasset.
No, Paul, look up above. Those are the upcoming meeting dates.
Oh, I'm
it
sorry.
Took us into the future.
I'm being
Back to the future.
I'm
That
being
is not how we
Nostradamus.
do minutes around here.
My middle name is Nostradamus, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of 10/6/2020 of the Cohasset Select Board.
Is there a second? Second. All right, roll call vote, beginning with Jack.
As I have in the past as clerk, I am going to, I'm going to vote against them because I think we've done that. And that's just to do that because we will be doing that. And further, as clerk, I will contact Town Council Durensis and see if I can get some guidance from Town Council on what we can do to do this.
Okay. Sorry, Jack. Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Short, aye.
Corey hasn't voted yet.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. No, I reviewed the minutes and the changes were good. So Corey hasn't.
Diane
Carrie
Kennedy,
Thompson,
aye.
aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye. Okay, so those are approved. We're going to move on to the second set of minutes. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from October 20th, 2020.
Okay. Okay, roll call.
Is ditto a way I can?
Just say nay.
Nay.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Short, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Okay, lastly,
I
I
move
make
that
a
we
motion to approve the minutes of 10/27/2020 Board, Select Board, Cohasset.
second.
okay, roll call.
Jack Creighton, nay.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Short, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Okay, great. Those are done. I have no topics not reasonably anticipated. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, roll call.
Jack
Don't
Creighton.
say nay, Jack.
No, of course not. Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Short, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Great. Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night, all.
Have
Thank
a
you.
nice Thanksgiving.
Have so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Always
Happy
a good
Thanksgiving.
time, everyone.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy
This has been my
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
See everyone later.